Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we explore Old Gran-dad Bourbon. Is it really that good? Let's find out. Run the video. Alright then folks, before we begin, as always, thank you to all the folks out there who have subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate every last one of you. It's the best way to give back to the channel. But if you'd like to ramp that up and do something a little bit extra, go over to TheWhiskeyCove.square.site. The link is in the description down below. And check out some of the Whiskey Cove premium glassware. Excellently priced, inscribed with the Whiskey Cove there. And don't forget to like and comment on this video if you've ever tried Old Gran-dad Bourbon, that is. So on today's episode, we explore the Old Gran-dad lineup, made from by Jim Beam down there in Claremont, Kentucky. So Old Gran-dad has a pretty good reputation of being a really good budget whiskey. Just off the bat, I paid about $10 for the regular straight bourbon, I paid about $15, $18, I think it was maybe for the bonded, and then $30 for Old Gran-dad 114. Specifically, Old Gran-dad 114 has a massive cult following because a lot of people say that it's just excellent value for money. I've tried this, but that was a long time ago. I haven't had the opportunity to get into it lately, or at least since having the channel, because the distribution in Colorado hasn't been great until the last few months. So I was able to pick this up. So we have the full set here. So what we'll do today, it's not gonna be a blind. We're just gonna taste through the whiskeys here. We're gonna start with the regular offering, the general straight bourbon whiskey. We'll move into the bonded, and then we'll move into the 114. With that being said, let's get these whiskeys into the glasses, and they are gonna be fresh cracks there too. So we'll get some of the glasses here. Get these cracked. Let's hear this one. This is just a plastic cap. The Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey is 40% ABV or 80 proof, and these are all the high rye mash bill there. So let's get this one cracked. Classic plastic cap crack there. The bonded has a plastic label on it, and it has a cork on it, which is nice. Cork pop. Oh, pretty good cork popper there. Is it plastic fake cork? And then lastly, the 114 has this I really like the 114 ball. It's like nice and stumpy and has a really cool wide neck there. It's again plastic on the top. And the cork is actually a real cork. How's the cork pop though? Oh, it's a bit wet. Let's see if we can go in for again there. Yeah, there's not much of a cork pop with that one. But again, it has that wide neck, so it doesn't quite tunnel it as much. Really cool looking bottle, like I said earlier on. All right then folks, they're all in the glasses. I've let them breathe a couple of minutes at this point, just to kind of accumulate to the atmosphere here. So let's go into the Old Gran-dad straight bourbon whiskey there. Again, about $10, so we probably can't expect too much from this offering, because it is a bit of a bargain bottom shelf sipper. So let's go here. Again, I haven't tried this one or that one at all. I have tried the 114, but that was a long time ago. Just looking in the glass, these all look kind of like the same color. Maybe the 114 is a little bit darker, but this is kind of like a lighter honey, like a golden hay color. The biggest thing that I can say about this whiskey so far, it has a pretty great nose for like a $10 whiskey. It's a very solid nose. We reviewed the El Matili not so long ago, and this has a better nose than the El Matili, and this is $10. Of course, we haven't tried it yet, but the nose is pretty good. You definitely get beautiful caramel vanilla notes there. I'm really impressed with this nose. And you get a little bit of that spice there as well. I wouldn't say it's quite the high rye spice type nose. It's kind of more of like a peppery type nose there. It's kind of more of like a cracked black pepper. But it has some really nice stone fruits there as well. I'm getting almost like a plum. Oh, that's a really good nose. Okay, let's go in for a taste. This is Old Gran-dad straight bourbon whiskey and has a great nose. Let's go in for a taste. So first impressions just on the taste there. It's not as good as the nose, which is which is probably expected because the nose is actually really good. We'll also rate each one and give a value for money like we do on our regular whiskey reviews, but we'll also do that here today as well. But again, with that palate, it has quite a lot of spice on the palate. Not overly spicy, but just the consistency of the spicy. It's there right away through the whole thing. Up front, in the middle of the palate, and then definitely on the finish there as well. You get a little bit of lacing of the mouth, but not too much. It does taste a little bit thin, which is understandable, but that spice just kind of keeps it alive a little bit there. Let's go in for another taste here. Yeah, it is just a little bit thin. You do get some of that stone fruit there again, more like a plum, or maybe something like more like ripened plum. Get more of that like tartar note. But there it is the spice that keeps it alive. You get a little bit of sweetness, some more spice to kind of dancing on your tongue a little bit. But the main takeaway for this one is that nose is actually pretty incredible for what it is. I could nose this all day. Wow, that's actually really surprised me. That's probably the best nose I've ever had from a $10 bottle of whiskey. Really impressed with that bottle so far, especially in the nose. We'll do the ratings at the end. So that was the straight bourbon whiskey. Let's cleanse our palate and get into the bonded. So it's the Old Gran-dad bonded. It says aged for at least 4 years, which it has to. It says distilled under the requirements of the Century-Old Bottled in Bond Act. It shares quite a similar nose to the straight bourbon whiskey, actually, last one. It's just not as fruity. Not getting too many more of those stone fruit notes. It's definitely there, but it's not as strong as the nose on the first glass. This does have a bit more sweetness there as well. I wouldn't say you can nose a little bit more proof, but some of the flavor notes that you associate with a higher proof whiskey, and I don't mean cask strength, I just mean when you get up to 50, just a little bit more intense with this one than they were with Old Gran-dad straight bourbon whiskey. There's definitely a little bit more sweetness there on the nose. So more sweetness, less fruit notes, and probably a little bit less spice as well. It doesn't nose ethanol-y. Like I said, I paid like $15, $16 for this. So again, very cheap. For a very solid nose, very solid. Not as good as glass one, but very solid and a little bit different. Let's go in for a taste here. This is Old Gran-dad bonded. So immediately, definitely a better mouthfeel. Definitely more viscous, more oilier, and also spicier as well. I might just get a touch of peanut brittle there, right at the back end on the finish. There's some spice, there's some like really nice caramel sweetness, and there's ever so slight peanut shell note as well, but it's really hard to find because there's actually, like I said, quite a lot of spice there. You get a lot of those bacon spices, and you get a lot of that rye spice as well. Not really picking up any mint from the rye, but this has, like I said, the mouthfeel is much better. You do get more sweetness. I can smell it on the nose and I can taste it on the palate now. And that kind of sweetness, barrel char note kind of makes up for the thickness of this whiskey. It's pretty impressive so far for Old Gran-dad bonded at a $16 to have that much of a body. Let's go in for another taste here. It's just a lot more balanced than the first one. And again, much like the first one, it does have that spice which kind of keeps it alive, but it has so much more other things going for it with that sweetness. Again, beautiful vanilla, that peanut brittle note there as well, and it also has a really nice woody, oaky backbone that kind of hits under your tongue and to the side of your tongue, those wood tannins. Really good whiskey so far, which I'm really impressed. I've been really impressed with both of them so far, so I'm hoping the 114 can be as good as I remember it to be, because the bonded just kind of blew my socks off a little bit there. A really, really, really great whiskey. So let's cleanse the palate here, and then let's move in to maybe the whiskey that we were all here to see, and that is the Old Gran-dad 114. All right then, folks, let's get into glass 3, Old Gran-dad 114. Again, like I said, these two were kind of like the same on color, and this is just ever so darker, maybe more of like a toasted burnt honey kind of note. And it definitely looks a little thicker as I'm rolling it in the glass there, which is expected with higher proof. It doesn't say anything about age on the back of this one. It just says that it's made from a unique recipe that uses more of the costly small grains, which create a distinct flavor and body. And then it just says lot number 1. Not sure what that is. And a lot of people say in the Whiskey Severe that Old Gran-dad 114 is almost like a barrel strength or cask strength version of Basil Hayden's. You could see that. They're both made by Jim Beam. And people always ask, why don't they bring out like a cask strength version of Basil Hayden's? Well, it's because they kind of already have it. So let's go in for a nose on Old Gran-dad 114. I'm getting kind of like a Brown-Forman bubblegum note there actually, which I like. If you watch the channel, I like that note a lot. It's kind of like the same one you get from Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof. Yeah, it's definitely like that cherry bubblegum type note. Kind of like those old cherry sweets that you used to pick up like 5 cents for. Well, I guess it used to be like 2 cents when I was a kid. Not as much spice than the other two so far. And again, I am still picking up that kind of ripe plum note. But it's definitely a lot more barrel char, a lot more sweet. And maybe like a touch of like a toasted marshmallow. Just as I'm nosing through it, I am picking up a little bit more spice actually now. A little bit more of that rye spice. Because I am picking up the ever so small spearmint note. It's not overwhelming and you have to look for it, and that's kind of one of my markers to look for when I'm kind of nosing for rye. If I can kind of taste like a vanilla-y spearminty, or nose a vanilla-y spearminty note, that's kind of like I said, a hallmark to some rye spice for me. But a very balanced nose, not heat. Like I'm able to stick my nose right in there and nose the whiskey, and I'm not getting really any ethanol burn whatsoever. I'm really excited by this. Let's go for a taste. Old Gran-dad 114. I know it took me a while to nose the spice, but this is a spicy mama whiskey. This is red hot cinnamon candy. You put it in your mouth, you start chewing the candy. It's like really nice and sweet to begin with. And then after that, you get this like cinnamon spice bomb that kind of almost burns your tongue there as well. And I'm definitely getting that with this whiskey. This is probably one of the spiciest whiskeys I've tried for a very, very, very long time. You are getting a little bit of that proof that travels through there as well. And as soon as you taste it, you get a little bit of that barrel char, like caramelized sweetness there. But then this kind of spice bomb just rolls into town and just demolishes that sweetness and then consumes your palate with all that spice there. Let's see if we can pick apart some of those flavor profiles a little bit more and delve into the finish. So then just on that second pass there, like I was saying, as I picked the whiskey apart a little bit more, as that kind of rye spice rolls into town, knocks that original sweetness off. Not only do you get the rye spice, then towards the back end, towards the finish, the oak spice comes through and joins that posse of spices. And it combines with this really long, spicy and drier finish with those oak tannins on that back end there as well. If you like a spicier whiskey, this is definitely for you. And it doesn't surprise me that a whiskey from Jim Beam or a bourbon from Jim Beam at this sort of ABV is a spicy whiskey, because I kind of get a lot of those notes from a lot of the stuff that Jim Beam tends to do. Think of your Knob Creeks, think of your Bookers as well. This reminds me actually of Bookers, this Old Gran-dad 114, which is probably the biggest compliment I can give this whiskey. Old Gran-dad 114 coming in at like $30 versus Bookers, which is now like $90 to $100 at MSRP. It's just giving me a new video idea. Bookers up against some Old Gran-dad 114. We have 3 different Bookers back there. We have Old Gran-dad 114, and I think we need to do a blind, because I haven't drunken my Bookers for a while, because I've kind of gone off of Jim Beam a little bit, so to speak. Even though Jim Beam has a special place in my heart of being some of the first bourbon I've ever tried. So I might need to get back into it with Old Gran-dad 114, because I hypothesized that this could probably be better than the Bookers I have, which is insane if you think about it. So the biggest takeaway I can say is that I'm actually being quite blown away by all of these whiskeys. So with glass 1, we had an incredible nose. And still, if I go back to it, you still get that bright stone fruit, beautiful vanillas there as well. This has this nose is the best out of the 3. And it's a $10 bottle whiskey. That's pretty insane. However, the palate let it down. It was a lot thin. It fell off. You did get a touch of spice, but it kind of just fell off a little bit. The spice kind of kept it alive a little bit, but there wasn't much oak there as well. And then with the bonded, you kind of had a blend of both of these. You had the spice, but you had some of those sweeter notes and some fruity notes. So this was a really good combination of almost these two. It was almost like you got these two, put them into the same glass, which is probably exactly what they did. Obviously it's bonded, so that changes that a little bit, but it does bridge the gap for these two whiskeys very, very well. And then the Old Gran-dad was just a cinnamon spice bomb with that rice spice and that oak spice. Like I said, if you like a spicier whiskey and you like a 57% ABV whiskey, then that could be an excellent $30 bottle for you folks at home. So let's think a little bit about this then. So what we do, if you haven't watched any of the reviews on the channel, and if you haven't already, you definitely should, because I feel like some of the reviews are some of my best work, because I really go in depth about how I taste whiskey and some other small nuances when it comes to, for me, trying whiskey. So what we like to do is we like to give it a value for money, which is A through F, A being the best, F being the worst, and then we give it a rating out of 100. Why do we do 100 instead like 0 to 10? Well, when you do 100, we feel like we can just get a little bit more specific. We can kind of really nail down the rating of what we want to do. So with that being said, Old Gran-dad straight bourbon whiskey, value for money, I'm going to give it an A. I think it deserves an A. Yes, the body lets it down a little bit, but that nose is incredible. I can't say enough good things about that nose. That nose, if I was just scoring nose out of 100, I think that would be like 90, which is just insane if you think about it. However, body lets it down. But yes, I'm giving it an A because it's still like $10. Rating out of 100. So if I give it like a 90 just for the nose, the body will be like 30. The finish would be like 30 as well. So based upon those three major aspects, I'm gonna give it a 58. And I think that's really fair and a really good score for that bottle of whiskey. But it's just like, if it was just written on the nose alone, it would have been a lot higher. However, you have to take everything else into consideration. So 58 for that one. And then for the bonded, like I said, I did a really great job of balancing both of these other two bottles. And I'm gonna give this a value for money. I'm gonna give this an A. Really well balanced whiskey, and again, value for money. It's like $16, which is nuts. Could be replacing my Evan Williams bottled in bond. So what am I going to give this as a score of 100? I'm going to give this a 74, and I think that's an excellent score for this bottle of whiskey considering the price. 74 of 100 is phenomenal value for money and an excellent score as well. Old Gran-dad 114. It takes on the bonded and then it goes one step further. You get a little bit more heat, more barrel char. Yes, you get a little bit of sweetness before spice bomb takes over. And this is really hard for me to score this whiskey because, truth be told, I'm not a spicy whiskey fan. I prefer a sweeter or an aged whiskey where you get a little bit of proof that kind of balances it out, as opposed to a sweeter whiskey with the spice that balances it out. I like sweeter and aged whiskey or higher proof. So for me, I'm going to also give this, I think, like a 74 as well. So we had 74, 74, and 58. Value for money, AAB. So I think that's a great turnout. Yes, I probably could have given this a higher score, and if it was just on my palate, if this was the type of whiskey that I liked, I feel like you could have got into the 80s with this one. However, for me, just because of my palate, I do appreciate the juice that's in the glass, but I have to be as honest and open with you folks at home. And if you watch enough of my content, you might be able to gauge where my palate is at, and then kind of find if my palate is similar to yours. So I can't just give it scores based upon how much I appreciate that whiskey. So I have to be honest with it, and it's just a little bit too spicy for me. But if you're someone who likes a spicier whiskey, like I said earlier on, for $30, it's a no-brainer. And I think this is going to be an excellent whiskey to put into cocktails there as well. So with that all being said, and if you stuck around this, kind of just conclude what we kind of did here, or just some final thoughts. So if you think about it, $30, 16, and then 10, 26. So that's $56 worth of whiskey we have on the table here. And we've just given them some really solid ratings. So if you're someone who might just be starting out in whiskey, or you're just looking to spend a little bit of money but getting a lot of bang for your buck, you might want to try to pick up this range. I've been really impressed with them. I can't say enough good things about them. And you might just want to get the straight bourbon whiskey just because you can nose it all day and it's still so good on the nose. That's incredible. It's a fantastic nose. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video, because I have. It's been a really fun introduction to Old Gran-dad, and it's kind of definitely stood up to the cult following that it does have. So as we drink through the world's whiskey one glass at a time, let's go with a 114 Spice Bomb. Cheers.